Well, hi all, and welcome to First Line of Defense Secure Enterprise Browser. Now, today's awesome webinar is sponsored by Menlo Security. I'm produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I'm so happy that I get to be your moderator for this webinar because all too often, browsers are a security blind spot in our organizations, right? They are absolutely essential to our teams, to our workforce, to our operations, which also makes them prime targets for security attacks. So today, we are going to talk to two incredible experts who will help us understand how cloud computing and the move towards remote and hybrid work environments have all helped to redefine and reshape the security landscape and how you can prevent your browser from becoming a target to threat actors. This is such an important conversation. I cannot wait to get started on our chat. So I'm going to get through a few housekeeping points very quickly, and then we will get this show on the road. We're going to start with a little bit of a guided tour of your audience console. Let's click around together and explore it together if you haven't already done so. We're going to start in the questions section of your audience console. So find that questions tab right now. Now, the absolute best part of a webinar just like this one here today is the chance to ask questions directly of experts. And again, we've got two rock stars here with us today, so get those questions ready. We want to have a fun and interactive conversation. Our speakers are going to be taking questions as they go. We're going to do Q&A at the end. We've got a demo lined up. We have a whole host of exciting things in front of you. So now is a great time to make sure that you're getting all of those questions in and asked and answered. Now you can give it a little test run right now. You can say hi, say hello, give a little greeting to the folks here with us today. I see Zhang, I see Maria, I've got Reg, hey Morteza, hey Andrew, Seth, Richard, Jorge, Tony. We got a whole awesome crew here with us today. I cannot wait to talk with you more. So please tell us how you're doing, say hi, and make sure you're getting those questions in as we go through our session today. Okay, so if you were in the questions window, the next stop is going to be one tab over. You're going to take a look at the handouts tab. Now, this is absolutely chock full of important resources and takeaways that you are going to want to spend some time with after we wrap. So make sure you're opening those resources, holding on to them. Don't go too far away from us yet because we've got a whole webinar in front of us. But at the end of our webinar, you're going to want to come back to all of that. So make sure you've got those resources locked and loaded as we go through the webinar today. Now, it's not just cool content that we're giving away at this wonderful webinar. We also have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will give away as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. So you do need to be here live and present in order to win that Amazon gift card. And you do need to meet all of the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those T's and C's are, no problem. We have them all written down for you. They're in the handouts tab. Head on over to the handouts tab and you can find them waiting for you there. Now, I can see from the folks in the room today, we are not going to need any additional incentive to be asking questions. However, we've got it for you anyway. So we have an additional prize, and that is a $50 Amazon gift card going to the best question asked. That's the challenge today, to come up with the best question for our speakers. Now, we are going to review all of the questions asked after we wrap up the webinar. So even if your question does not get asked and answered by our speakers as they're going through or in our live Q&A at the end, no problem at all. You are still entered to win. So get those questions in because, hey, it just makes everything a little extra awesome and you have a chance of winning that $50 Amazon gift card. Okay, my friends, well, that was it for all the housekeeping. I did that very quickly. I have barely breathed in the last couple minutes because I want to get our incredible speakers on out here with us. I am so happy to introduce you all to Andrew Harding, Vice President of Cybersecurity Strategy at Menlo Security, and of course, Jonathan Lee, Principal Product Manager, also at Menlo Security. Andrew and Jonathan, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know you got a lot of great stuff to cover. We got a chat, we got a demo, we've got a whole bunch of awesomeness coming our way. So Andrew, I am going to step back and hand things on over to you. Take it away.
Hey, thanks, Jess. Yes, thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit through some background information and what we mean by treating the browser as the first line of defense and talk about something that we call the browser context and how you can add that to security controls and policy with an enterprise browser solution. I'm going to talk for a bit. I'm happy to take questions along the way. And then Jonathan is going to give a demo focused on a piece of our larger solution. And if you're interested, you can follow up after that and get more information about Menlo. So the browser context is a change in perspective that changes the way we look at defenses and the things that can be enabled by cybersecurity controls. That's a big piece of the change. Rather than just a widget and moving a place where we play defense, moving from firewalls or next-gen AV, moving to the browser, rather than just playing defense, we open up new opportunities, and I'll talk about how we do that as we go through the presentation here. But before I do that, I think it's important to set a little housekeeping here. If you're interested along the way, and I'll show this again, if you want a demo or you want to follow up, you can just grab that QR code and you can follow up with us here at Menlo. It's important, I think, to think about that because we're going to talk about 3 pillars, and then Jonathan's going to demo one of the pillars. As I get into the pillars, you might have interest in something we didn't cover here today. So Menlo Security, quick advertisement. We're the pioneer of browser security. We created something called remote browser isolation some time ago. We have expanded that to secure cloud browsing, and I will talk about that in some detail and kind of decompose that for you. And the reason why maybe Menlo has something to say about this that matters is that we have over 800 customers. We have 8 million plus active users. 400 billion browser web sessions every year are secured by Menlo. As you can see from the sort of happy collection of icons there or logos there, were used in some of the environments that have the highest security requirements or that represent the largest risk of attack because they're very public or high profile entities. We are the largest, our largest deployment, and we are one of the largest deployments within the US BYOD for protecting SaaS applications, for example. So those that need security, large or small, are turning to Menlo to secure browsing and take security beyond just protecting an endpoint or protecting a network. The reason we need to do that now is that it's the 30th anniversary of sort of this picture. It's looking like a 1990s picture for a reason. When we were using desktops and that original browser and connecting to more mainframes than modern servers, it was all very simple. And we did the work to lock down transport security, what started as SSL and what became TLS over time. And we put a lock on that browser, and we kind of forgot to give the browser any attention for a while. I just read yesterday that at this time, 30 years ago, there were less than 700 servers on the web, as it was termed, and things were just coming to be. If we look at how we move forward, 10 years forward, another 10 years forward up to now, we focused on network security and endpoint security, and that was necessary. It was needed, and in some cases enough 20 years ago. The idea of a secure web gateway that would get between you and the risk on the internet was enough to start with. And as we needed to scale out, and with the advent of x86 virtualization and then other forms of virtualization, we could duplicate those gateways, and we could make the endpoint protections on my little Mac there in the slide. We could make those better over time, so we could scale out and we could get better endpoint protections. And ultimately, as the cloud emerged, we were able to scale even further, protect the things that we were deploying in the cloud, so treating these workloads that we were putting in the cloud as another endpoint that needs to be protected. That's amounted to a very complex set of controls. And in this set of controls, whether it's endpoint security or elements of email security or things that are trying to protect data with a data that goes back and forth from a browser to a SaaS application, of course, secure web gateways and firewalls and next-gen firewalls, these things are trying to look at packets on the network and do smarter and smarter things to stop threats from making progress through our networks. We've made a lot of progress. We've also added a lot of complexity. And in some of that complexity, in fact, the reason for some of that complexity is we've been trying to secure what networking folks call layer 7, layer 8 issues, meaning things that are more related to applications, by doing it by processing network traffic. Or if we're on the endpoint, we've been trying to catch a threat right before something goes wrong. And this has amounted to complexity. It's amounted to expense. It's also resulted in an environment where attackers can look at the system and then design attacks to evade those controls. And if there's nothing protecting the browser, then the browser becomes the thing that they go after. So the security controls are missing these new threats that are designed to evade that maze of defensive that we put in place. Much of that maze of defenses is designed to provide web security to stop content that's not going to be compliant with policy from getting in or going out of a network. It's not really designed to provide browser security, and it's truly not designed for an environment where users work from a location other than an office, and users are accessing applications that are mostly provided in the cloud or by a SaaS provider. And so there isn't infrastructure to put all those controls in. And even if you do, attacks can evade those controls. So complex network services have emerged to try to help out, to put another network between users and the internet. They hide that complexity, they hide all those controls I talked about that we used to do ourselves, but they can be evaded. So with existing controls being ineffective, with trying to build it ourselves or relying on others, resulting in a lot of complexity, and with the initial attempt by some of these network services to do a version of remote browser isolation within their network service being largely unusable at any scale or for users who have to get work done, we need to do something different. And that's what we're here to kind of cover today. So I hope I've set the context for why we need to do something, but I'm just going to give you some facts here that I think make it really clear. If you have a network service, a secure web gateway, some existing cloud-based control, 75% of phishing links can get right through that because they're hosted on a website that would be categorized as good or okay. We see almost in a similar vein 3/4 of attacks of malware delivery coming from websites that would be categorized as allowed. So we've got these two big threats, phishing and malware delivery to the browser, that 3-ish out of 4 times can get right through existing controls. Now, those controls can get a signature in place or try to do some correlation or use what we call heuristics, which is just structured patterns. Use heuristics to try to get after those threats, but it takes them on average about 6 days. Sometimes it's 5.6. We measure this by looking at signature sets that are out there, and we see that it takes them about 6 days to get after a threat. That's an important number because a ransomware attack can now get its work done in less than 5 days. We have a partnership with Google, and there was just research announced I think in May, that described how ransomware attacks get their work done in 5 days or less. But it takes traditional controls 6 days to even find the threat. And frankly, if you take 6 days to find the threat, their work is done in 5, and sometimes that threat comes and goes in under 5. Finally here, these network scanners, no matter how sophisticated they are, no matter how long they've been around or how much they've been put into the cloud, they can't look at things that are protected, for example, by passwords. So if you're moving files around that are password protected, if you can't open up the content, you can't see the content, that content can be used to deliver something malicious. For example, a Word doc or a spreadsheet can try to fire up a PowerShell command and then fire up another PowerShell command, do that in a way that doesn't even create a file on disk. So endpoint protection systems, next-gen AV, EDR type things, they won't see it because no file is created and the process just gets fired off. So by the time they would see it, it's too late. Menlo, in contrast, enables folks to inspect password protected files. We inspect over 2 million password protected files every month in our own customer traffic. So we can give you visibility into things you can't see and protect you from things that get through other systems. What's important about that is that I got another 3/4 here. It's a 3/4 day. 75% of an average user's workday is spent inside the browser. It's quite surprising. You have to step back and think, hey, how much of my day did I spend in the browser doing work? I write, I deliver webinars, I build presentations, I even work on video editing sometimes inside the browser. I'm often in a meeting discussing something important inside the browser. So 3/4 of the day we're in the browser. We need to protect the place that we work and make sure that workspace is not under threat. The reason for that, and the reason we need to take a new approach, is that the business as it operates today is at risk. Last year, there were over $1 billion in ransomware demands paid out. We've seen one attack this year where the actual damages were about $1 billion already. I might have said a million, I meant $1 billion. And we know that 80% of attacks are now going after end users. However, our customers know that yet another defense is yet another thing they have to pay for. And so they need something more than just yet another defense. Of course, they want to defend against phishing. They want to catch and stop ransomware. But what's different about enterprise browsing and what's different about the Menlo approach is that in addition to providing protections, we can modernize things like VDI and remote access. We can bring zero trust access to even unmanaged devices in a way that's simple to deploy and simple to operate over time. And in fact, we can also enable faster adoptions of new tools like generative AI when it's coming through the browser, enable you to adopt a tool like that, but protect your data along the way so that you're not doing something new that's just creating more risk. So stepping back, we have a view of what our customers are trying to do. I think that will probably be concordant with what some of you are trying to do. But what we see is that security practitioners and IT teams, they have assets they need to manage. They need to protect those assets, the infrastructure and the systems, the applications and data. They need to protect the users that are now often remote while securing access to applications and data. We heard this from our customers. We heard they needed more than mere protection from ransomware and phishing, even though that's critical. At the end of the day, and this is some of what Jonathan will show in a bit, we all just want users to stop clicking on links they shouldn't and getting phished and giving away a credential. So that's what the Menlo Secure Enterprise Browsing solution was built to do. It was built to treat the browser as an enterprise asset, to do those things that we're trying to achieve as security practitioners or as IT staff, IT leaders. We're trying to manage those assets. We want to secure the applications and data that are associated with work, and we want to protect users along the way. And that's what Menlo has delivered in the Secure Enterprise Browser solution. Without replacing the browser that folks are using, without building out a whole new infrastructure system or adopting a new cloud network service, you can do the smaller things that are necessary to manage, secure, and then protect users. So manage assets, secure applications and data, and protect users. So to do that, we view that you need to configure policies for local and secure cloud browsers. So your local browser is a browser you're using. If you're going through Menlo, you'd also be using a cloud browser. It would do some of your browsing on behalf of you so that you have a digital twin in the cloud working on your behalf. While we're doing that, we can provide visibility and forensics into the transactions and provide secure access to enterprise applications and also SaaS services that they're going to be using. Jonathan's going to talk more about how we protect users from zero-hour phishing and infected files and browser exploits. We think these are the three things that we need to do, and we think it's rooted in secure cloud browsing. So when I say secure cloud browsing, I'm talking about using a local browser and having a hardened digital twin in the cloud, sort of a next generation beyond the first generation of remote browser isolation. And that hardened digital twin in the cloud works on the user's behalf, does the browsing for them, executes, detonates any JavaScript, makes sure no malicious content gets through, and importantly, looks seamless to the end user. So the browser works for you in the cloud and delivers the content to the local browser in a way that's seamless to the end user. Along the way, the policy, the configuration associated with a policy for that local browser on the left next to user, makes sure that that endpoint browser, that local browser, can't do things that would represent risk, and make sure that it works with the cloud browser to provide a secure and easy to use experience. So secure cloud browsing is different in that content runs in the cloud. Secure cloud browsing is more secure. Sorry, I had a hitch with a slide here. Secure cloud browsing is more secure because it moves past network-only controls and moves past trying to protect everything in the endpoint at the last minute. That cloud browser fetches, executes, and renders content in the cloud and delivers it to the user's local browser in a way that's transparent to the end user and that really works at scale and is highly responsive to the end user. Historically, some folks have worried about the cost of running another browser. The notion of usage costs is just something that just doesn't exist anymore. Folks can run a Menlo cloud browser along with a managed local browser in a way that's more cost effective than replacing a browser, running a duplicate browser, or adding on a bunch of network-based security services to try to get the job done. And secure cloud browsing also opens up those use cases. Hey, Jonathan, I'm going to wrap it up here because I know I'm over time a little bit. Secure cloud browsing defends against ransomware and malware. It also opens up connectivity use cases. It can enable you to replace outdated and costly VDI. It can also enable a very simple zero trust access that you can deploy not in a year or 6 months, but over the course of a week or a month. Secure cloud browsing, adding the browsing context, really amounts to three things: managing that local browsing context, providing access to applications and protecting data through a cloud browser and an associated extension for a Chrome or Edge browser, and then making sure that you're protected from internet threats through something that we call Heat Shield. And Jonathan will talk about that in a moment. If I've piqued some interest here and you want to follow up, we've got a QR code you can click on, and I'll hand it over to Jonathan now.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly here and we'll get going. All right. Hopefully you should see the dashboard up there.
We can see you.
Excellent. So I want to talk about a few different capabilities across those three pillars that Andrew talked about. So the manage, protect, and secure. Where I wanted to start off was on the manage pillar, specifically our browser posture management capability. What this effectively does is allow you to streamline the process of hardening and securing your browser footprint, your Chrome, your Edge browsers across all of your devices, the ability to effectively apply industry benchmark, best practice settings and controls to the hundreds of different configuration options that browsers now have. And these are pushed out increasingly on a monthly basis, new capabilities, new features to browsers, without teams having the opportunity to fully understand what the security implications are of those various settings that are being added with each new update that is pushed out by Google and Microsoft. So what we've done is effectively taken two of the sort of leading industry standard benchmarks for hardening the browser. That's CIS 1 and 2, so two different levels which you can choose from between a sort of typical corporate level and one that's really high security government level benchmark in terms of how to optimally harden the browser footprint. And what this tool enables you to do is effectively take your existing browser configuration from a standard desktop image, for example, and you can simply go ahead and export that as a JSON file directly from the browser, and then that can be imported into the tool. So if we go ahead and export this policy now, and then we go back in here, browse to that individual policy which we've just exported out, and then we choose one of those benchmarks. So we can choose the CIS level 1 or level 2. CIS, by the way, is Center for Internet Security, and they publish this guidelines, these benchmarks, on an annual basis. So if we go ahead and choose level 1, what it's going to give us now is different recommendations for the various settings, default settings and policies that are currently in force for my browser. So we can look at anything that directly conflicts with the benchmark recommendations, and then also those where there's maybe no default setting or the user has the option to effectively make a choice. So if we go in here, we can see what the current policy is for these settings and what the recommended setting is according to that benchmark. Now you can simply go ahead and accept all of those, or you can review them individually, for example. And there are settings that would allow you to, for example, restrict the use of incognito mode or guest mode. That might be relevant in the event that you want to prevent a user from browsing the internet, but leaving no forensic information or details about history or anything that they've done during that session. So you may choose to restrict that. The ability to delete history, the ability to download files, or apply, for example, a policy around preventing malicious files from being downloaded based on a lookup to Google's platform. So you can go through each of these settings and just quickly decide which of those you want to accept. And then once you've done that, you can save the progress and you can effectively say you're now done with this, and you will have your assessment profile there ready to go, and that can then be exported out from the system so it can be pushed out to your endpoints. So that gives you the option to apply a different policy, for example, to developers than a quote unquote normal user. You may want to, for example, restrict access to developer tools. Once you've got that profile established, then you can push it out to the endpoints via the Intune management platform. Moving forward, we'll also provide a full end-to-end capability, so that can all be managed directly within the admin portal. But today what you would do is effectively export that JSON file back out and then push it via your Intune management platform. So that was the first piece that I wanted to talk about. The second one is in our protect pillar. So that is our heat shield capability that Andrew talked about. And this is basically phishing protection beyond the inbox. So typically phishing controls happen at the email level as emails are coming in, which contain links. They can be analyzed. But what we find is these new zero-hour phishing attacks that are highly evasive are combining multiple techniques to bypass those existing controls. Some examples of that would be cloud platform abuse. So basically taking a trusted platform like Cloudflare Workers and hosting a short-lived phishing site on it and taking advantage of the reputation. We also see the use of adversary in the middle phishing frameworks, which allows an adversary to obtain session cookies by intercepting and sitting between the communication of a user and the actual site that they're attempting to log into. So what we've done is leverage our secure cloud browser, that digital twin that sits there in the Menlo cloud and is doing all the fetching and executing of content on behalf of the local browser that's running on the endpoint. That shifts the browser to the cloud effectively and gives us enhanced visibility into each and every web session. And that includes those evasive attacks that are delivering malicious payloads through the browser, stage 1 dropper files, web exploits, 0 days, and what we term zero-hour phishing attacks. So these are phishing sites, phishing campaigns for which no industry detections and protections exist at the time of click. So what I wanted to show here is how that works in practice. We have a sort of mocked fake phishing site here, and this is actually very similar to one that we actually saw in a real world attack, which was quite tailored towards individual financial service companies. So they took the effort to customize this page, make it look legitimate, something that a user could trust. And then the lure was effectively a document has been shared with you. You simply need to click on the review document button, and that would take them to what looks like a completely normal O365 login page with the standard behavior there. Now, if I was to go to that same site through through a browser that was protected by the Menlo platform, what happens is that digital twin, that browser in the cloud that is doing all that fetching and executing of the content on behalf of the local browser, we're then in a position to apply both AI and ML detection models to what the user sees on the page and also what they don't see. So just to take those one at a time, when I say what they see visually, we're looking at the page itself. We're looking for the presence of logos and applying computer vision models to accurately detect where a Microsoft logo or an Adobe logo or a DocuSign logo exists on the page that would indicate that there is some attempt there to make the user believe this is a legitimate site and trust it and therefore enter their credentials. And then what they don't see, that's essentially how the page is constructed. So that's the underlying DOM. When you view page source, you see the HTML source code used to construct the page. Because we are browsing on behalf using that surrogate browser, we have complete visibility into the DOM. So that's how all of the HTML code is being executed to render the actual web page to the user in the browser. So we have excellent visibility into how a page is constructed, and then we can apply analysis and heuristics to that to also infer the likely intent of a page and whether it's malicious or not. So in this case, I'm going through the Menlo platform here. Again, I click on that review document, but in this case, I've kind of gone straight through to a block page, which has dynamically analyzed that page, obviously within split seconds, but it's returned back a block page dynamically based on the policy that was in effect. So if I just switch back now to the dashboard, you can see here under the policy, we have a very simple configuration here for that heat shield protection. And then I simply chose a block action for all 0-hour phishing. If we look at the logs, we can also view here the activity and the block action that was categorized as 0-hour phishing, but you'll see there's also a camera. So that indicates that this session was recorded or captured using our browser forensics tool. So if I just jump over here to our browser forensics viewer, I can actually see a timeline view of my entire browsing session. What we have effectively done is capture the HAR file and all the screenshots at each stage of the navigations through those pages, through those redirects as new tabs were opened. All of that is captured and stored locally within the customer's environment, within an AWS S3 bucket, within Azure Blob Storage. So none of this data resides within the Menlo platform itself, but it provides an easy way to navigate through the entirety of a user's browsing session through a chronological viewer. So you have this timeline view here that you can step through and see at each stage what page was accessed, where the user went to at each point in time. You can also see the resources that were loaded, the JavaScript, the CSS, the HTML files. So all of that is captured for review. Later on, you can see where a new tab was opened or a redirect happened. You can see the point in time that that event happened, the size of the file, and so on. So this is giving investigators, security teams, SOC analysts, a much more rich, enhanced view of everything that's happened in an incident, as we saw here, accessing a phishing site. But this can be applied to multiple different use cases. As Andrew was talking about, secure access, secure application access is another example of where this can be a very valuable tool or capability. So you can see all the events, the full session when a user, maybe a contractor, has accessed an application that they've been provisioned to access via the browser, you would be able to see all of the steps, all of the interaction with an application, whether they downloaded files and so on. Okay, the final piece I wanted to talk about comes under the secure pillar. So I'll just move across here to a yet another browser profile. And in particular, what I want to talk about is our extension, which provides easy access for both managed and unmanaged devices that are accessing applications, specifically self-hosted applications that live either in the public cloud or the data center. But this can also be used for public SaaS applications as well that you want to put guardrails around. And really the intent here is to simplify access for users that have been granted access to one or more applications through this module. If I click on the extension here, click on the M, you can see that I've been granted 3 different applications that I can access through the browser without any VPN, no VDI here at all. So I've simply, all I need is a device that's running Chrome, Edge, and then I can go straight to the application without any further configurations or setting up any tunnels and so on. That's all done at the back end within the Menlo platform that's set up by the admin through the same admin portal we've just looked at. So if I go here, for example, to the sales dashboard, and this is actually a mocked up sales dashboard that we built for the purposes of the demo to show a couple of different capabilities that can be applied here. So as well as providing simplified access to applications through the browser, you can also apply security controls, but in both directions, upload and downloads, and last mile DLP. So an example might be you want to give a contractor access to a dashboard like this, but you want to prevent them downloading any or exporting any data, any CSV files, downloading any PDF reports, for example. Or you maybe want to just have a DLP policy apply here and say that as long as the data doesn't match on any of the DLP rules that have been configured, then they're okay to download the data. You can also apply watermarking here as well. So you'll notice on this page that my watermark, my email address, and the time of access is printed prominently across this page. And that also applies not just to the web session, but also any documents that are downloaded. So if I do an example here, I go ahead and download a sales report. What you see here is actually the sales report being viewed through a secure document viewer that is built into our secure cloud browser. And again, the watermarks are there prominently across that document. If I do want to download that file, for example, I can be just given the access to download a safe, sanitized version of that. That version, that PDF file that I can now look at offline, will also retain those same watermarks. So if I click on that now, you can see I have that document locally on my machine, but it still retains the watermarks. So from a data loss prevention in terms of protection, you have some pretty stringent controls that you can apply selectively based on applications or individual documents. If I just go back one step again to the application here, just log back in now, and one step too far. What we can also apply here is copy paste controls. So those can work either what a user is allowed to copy from an application, or what they're allowed to paste into an application, or between browser tabs, so going from one application to another. Just as a simple demonstration here, I can say, look, if there's an individual user, maybe he's a contractor, they want to just quickly grab some of this information so they can forward it on via email, for example. They go ahead and copy that. We can actually say, no, copying is disabled, and display that warning message there, which prevents a user from copying that into the clipboard. And this can all be managed centrally through the Menlo platform. Okay, so that was everything I just wanted to talk about here. Just to summarize, the Secure Application Access module enables you to easily grant access to one or more applications to both users on managed and unmanaged devices. We also have an option there for granting access to non-browser based applications through a separate Windows and Mac client. And it also enables you to potentially eliminate the need for VDI or issuing loaner laptops to contractors, because everything can be done directly through the native browser that's already on every user's device. Okay, so I think we'll move over to the Q&A at this point.
Hey, Jonathan, I just want to stop and say I should have had more faith in you. I thought you were going to just be able to demo one piece. You got through the managed pillar, browser posture manager, and forensics. You got through all of protecting users from phishing and malware threats. And then you definitely covered secure access to applications. So VPN-free, VDI-free access to applications. And while doing so, got the secure document viewer and our data leakage protection capabilities covered. So a tour de force. Thank you so much.
That is definitely a gold star demo that you get there, Jonathan. Well done. Andrew, Jonathan, what a great presentation. Thank you. Both of you crammed a ton of information, great insight. Are you ready to get into some audience Q&A?
We'd love to. If we haven't had folks just click the QR code and go to lunch, let's talk more.
Well, I am sure there are some folks enjoying their lunch while they hang out with us. Let's see who can type and eat at the same time. I'm going to start with this question here because we did get a couple of questions about, differences with like Chrome and Edge and Safari and all the, different functionalities. So can I achieve the same results using the native features of Chrome or Edge as I would with Menlo Secure Enterprise Browser?
I think that the short answer is no, you can't. Secure cloud browsing is the big difference. And I think you have to make a choice. Do you want to operate on the web like we did 30 years ago with content going down to browsers and thinking about content? It's more than cat videos and blink tags now. We have untrusted third-party code that can go directly to a browser. And that's not safe. That is what's enabling ransomware to be delivered, malware generally to be delivered. And we need better controls than hope we catch it at the last minute before they get across the line with phishing attacks, because even sophisticated users can't tell these imposter websites. Jonathan showed that Office 365 website, you can't tell it from the website by looking at it. So we need to be able to apply AI to these things to be more effective than traditional controls and take that burden off of users. So by managing that local browser policy and by smartly shifting to the hardened cloud browser when it makes sense, we not only provide protections, but we enable access to work in a different way, risk-free from a malware and phishing standpoint, access that also protects the data that goes down to the endpoint. Because when you access either a SaaS application with sensitive data like Salesforce or a sales dashboard like Jonathan showed, or an internal application, you might not want that data going down to the endpoint. And if you do let some data go down to the endpoint, you want to make sure that it's watermarked or has redactions applied. You just can't do that in an endpoint-only solution. Chrome's a great browser, but it needs some help. And replacement browsers that try to use Chromium to do this will just increase complexity, increase costs, and ultimately try to fight a losing fight. You can't win on the endpoint alone. It's contested ground. And just like AV has never been enough and kept trying to get better over time and left the browser gap in place, any kind of endpoint-only approach is going to be limited, complex, and costly.
I like that. That's contested ground. I think that's well said there. We got a couple of questions coming in asking to sort of, looking at how Menlo sits in the industry. So I'm wondering maybe if I can kind of distill all of these different compare and contrast requests from our audience into, what would you guys say is really the unique, the standout for Menlo Security?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I think if you look at the broad landscape here, I didn't see a bunch of vendor names, and I want to get into that. I don't want to get into bashing anybody.
Yeah.
There are cloud services. There are cloud services that start with sort of, hey, we'll route the traffic somewhere else and try to protect you. And these cloud services do a lot of important stuff, especially when you combine kind of the networking piece with some security. They do some important things. I think they've overreached. They can't close the browser security gap. Some of them have tried with a first effort at remote browser isolation, trying to send sort of like a video stream down. And I think it's widely recognized that those kind of old generation approaches to remote browser isolation don't get the job done. So there are some network security things that are adjacent to enterprise browsing, and there's some overlap there. And folks need to make a choice about do they want to, in a cost-effective way, close the browser security gap. And then there are, at the other end of the spectrum, approaches that are like, hey, let's throw out the browser. Let's get rid of Edge. Let's get rid of Chrome. But at the end of the day, those are built on Chromium, which is our cloud browser is also built on Chromium. So we leverage the security work that goes into Chromium. Google spends a lot of time and effort making sure that Chromium is secure to a point. We further harden it, add the Menlo technology to it, and operate that in the cloud in a way that brings up your tabs for you, takes those tabs away when you're done, and protects you along the way. And we work in concert with a browser from, say, Microsoft or Chrome. There are other browsers out there too. Secure Cloud Browsing works with Safari. And we don't require you to swap out and replace a browser with a replacement browser that's also going to be expensive to deploy. And if you think about taking a replacement browser and putting it on an endpoint, this contested ground, by changing Chromium and duplicating Chromium, you've done two things. You've now opened up Chromium. So all the work that Google did to secure Chromium, toss that out the window because you've made a bunch of changes. You've added a bunch of features to it. So you've doubled the attack surface on the endpoint. You've added a bunch of features to that endpoint that are now part of the attack surface, and you spent a lot of money to do that. So I think we shouldn't pay for something that has been free. I think there was a time 30 years ago when you could maybe pay for Netscape in a box. We shouldn't be paying for something that is free. We should be paying for what's important. Managing that asset that's so critical to our businesses, managing that policy, protecting the users who are using that browser and that browser is now being treated as an asset. And then we should leverage that asset to provide secure access to data to make the pain of VDI and the risk of VPN gateways just go away. And that's, I think, the middle way. And that's, I think, where Menlo lands in the space, sort of without the complexity and expense and risk of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as they say, the risk of a replacement browser, and without the incomplete and though still kind of expensive approach of trying to leverage cloud network services for everything. Mm-hmm. Cloud networking has its place. Network security is super important. It has its place. We need to close that security gap in a way that is simple to deploy and easy to own. And Menlo's right in the middle with sort of the Goldilocks approach, I'd call it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm loving it. Pay for what's important is also kind of ringing in my brain right now. I think, that's a really important thing to remember. Jonathan, I just want to ask if there was anything that you wanted to chime in terms of a key, unique or standout feature that gets you really excited as well.
Yeah, actually, I think it may relate to one of the questions here around approved add-ons or what can be used with Menlo browser. So there is Menlo's browser doesn't exist on the endpoint, as we've said. You continue using your existing browser, your existing Chrome, Edge, Firefox, etc. Our browser lives within our cloud platform, and you don't have any requirements to maintain or update that. That's all taken care of by Menlo. And that browser also lives in a disposable virtual container. So when you open up a tab on your local browser, a corresponding tab opens in that secure cloud browser. And when you close the tab on your local browser, that cloud browser is completely destroyed. It's gone. So even if that browser in the cloud was ever to be compromised, it can never get back down to the endpoint anyway. So that's a big part of also trying to do things locally versus doing them via that digital twin, that secure cloud browser, is nothing ever gets down to the endpoint anyway. But what I wanted to talk about was just in terms of extensions and making this platform more extensible for use in a variety of different ways, to have more granular access controls to something like Stack Overflow, for example, where you could say, okay, a user is allowed to use Stack Overflow in the context of the work environment to do their job, to research things, but you can limit what they're able to do in terms of interactivity within that, the context of that application. So we can do a lot of really powerful things with Chrome extensions that live within our secure cloud browser. We can redact data, for example, selectively when a user accesses a application. And again, it might be a contractor on their own device running through Chrome or Edge. You have the ability to enforce all of that at the cloud level, at the application level, and you don't need to worry about what's actually happening on the endpoint.
Jonathan, you make such a good point about how we do a lot and it's in the background. The security is tacit rather than right being in the user's face. So we don't say throw out the browser. We don't say a user has to learn a new tool and figure out different browsing profiles and this and that and the other. But in fact, in addition to the extensions that you were describing, or the extendable capability you were describing, we do things like in the background. When an application is a secure access application, the tabs look the same to the user, they show in the same window, but up in the cloud, they're actually two sets of tabs running with separate cookie jars. There's isolation within the user's session between sort of their personal browsing and secure access browsing, like the enterprise kind of access to to SaaS applications or to internal applications. And that's all seamless to the end user, so they don't have to learn anything or know that something is going on. All they have to know is they don't need to worry anymore. And the enterprise doesn't need to worry about losing data, applications being compromised. They don't even need to worry about applications being exposed to the internet, because when they are presented to the user through secure cloud browsing and Menlo, the application doesn't sit on the internet, even though a user who's internet connected is accessing it.
Perfect. You guys managed to, not only did you fit everything that you needed to in the demo, you've managed to answer like 2 or 3 questions in one go there. So gold stars across the board, which is also perfect timing, because unfortunately, and I do hate to say this, I think we're going to have to leave things there. But before I let both of you leave us today, I want to just ask, for anyone out there in the audience that is ready to learn more, wants to jump in, wants to get started with this conversation and kind of get to know Menlo a bit further, what would you recommend as kind of a first step? And Andrew, I don't know if you'd like to give us a next steps and takeaways.
So I think clicking on the QR code and setting up a demo or a follow-up is an obvious thing to do. I'm also totally open to connecting to people on LinkedIn. You can find me easily on LinkedIn, and I'm totally open to connecting to people there. And if you have a question or an objection or a follow-up, you've got 2 paths. One, easy QR code. I think we'll probably reach out as well, but you can reach out to me, and we are here to help. I think that's what's different about security practitioners. We are here to help achieve a mission, and that's close the browser security gap. We're not trying to replace the browser that all the users use and drive up costs with a new application or some complicated thing you're adding to network security. We want to help you close the browser security gap, but make it easy for end users to get access to the applications they need without burdening them with a bunch of new technology.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. We're all on the same team. That's why we're here together. I love that. And I know that there's a lot that we have not covered as much as we got into the conversation today. So I hope that we'll be able to convince you guys to come back and join us again to keep this conversation rolling. For anyone out there that still has a question burning in their brain, please do ask that. We are going to make sure, and I know that there's a lot I can see that we didn't even get to today. So we're going to make sure that all of these get sent to the Menlo Security team. So you will get responses back over email. So the QR code, step one, make sure you've got that open right now. And then also just send a question in the questions tab. Hey, I'd love to have a conversation, or I'm still wondering about this, and the team will follow up with you. Andrew and Jonathan, I want to thank both of you for being here, for leading a wonderful conversation, for a great demo. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you both.
Likewise, thank you.
All right. And to everyone out there that's still getting those questions in, keep them coming. If you're looking for a little more information right away, I mentioned the handouts tab at the top of our webinar here, and I'm going to send you back there now. So there's a couple of white papers that are going to be such great follow-up reading to this conversation. So you can get the enterprise browser solution, applicability for use within a zero trust architecture. That's an awesome place to start. Also a white paper on rethinking VDI enterprise. And I love this one, a CISO's guide to enterprise browsers, finding the right approach to protecting the browser. This is a fantastic takeaway. You've got in the full range here in these white papers, you've got everything through from strategic approaches down to tactical advice. So these are key takeaways. Make sure that you are using that QR code. Make sure that you are getting those handouts and taking them home with you, because you are going to want to spend some time. You're going to want to share them with your coworkers and colleagues when you're telling them about this wonderful webinar that you attended today and all the cool stuff you learned. So make sure you've got all of that. While you are doing the QR code and getting those handouts together, I am going to go ahead and give away, that's right, it's time for our $250 Amazon gift card. I always feel like I need a drum roll for that. We are going to send this out to someone who is here live, present, and hey, a little bit lucky at the webinar today. And that special someone is Don Locken from Wisconsin. Don Locken from Wisconsin. That's a very cool name. I like it. Don Locken from Wisconsin. Congratulations to you, Don. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap. Well, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank Menlo Security for making this webinar possible, especially, and a big and heartfelt thank you to Andrew and to Jonathan for such an interesting conversation, for taking us through that demo. I think we covered a lot here today. I hope your brains are all lit up and buzzing, because mine certainly is. And I think, again, we got to talk a little bit about the whys and the strategic approaches and how we're thinking about these concepts, but also really digging into the tactical and the important takeaways that maybe you can start to think about implementing within your organization. So I hope that you're walking away feeling like you've learned some really wonderful new things. I know I am, and I hope that I will get to see all of you at a webinar again soon. Until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day. Thanks all.